Let's go. Week 3 of the Decision Makers Playbook. Welcome, everybody, again to the Inner Circle. Now, last week, we built out the framework and you learned that it tells you how to process a decision. It tells you which type, right, and which protocol to apply. However, here's what the framework cannot protect you from, and it is yourself. Ultimately, you impact your decisions more than you think. And it all comes from the fact that your brain has shortcuts, not because you're careless, because you're human, you're a human being. And there's decades of research in behavioral economics that tell us and all point to the same conclusion that every smart, experienced, and well intentioned leaders make systematically predictable errors in judgment. Simple. We are humans. That's in short, it tells us that we will make errors in judgment, not because we or leaders lack information. It's because the brain's pre-programmed shortcuts that have been built through time. And this is it just happens through experience, and it happens through family culture. It happens through the way that you're raised. So you're programmed to think this way and to operate underneath this level of conscious thought. That's what happens. And that's why today we will talk through the bias decision making framework to allow you to break through the bias holdback. And I know that sometimes as we think about these programmed thoughts, they feel like judgment. Sometimes they feel like experience. They feel like intuition, and you say, like, my gut tells me I should do this. That's a programmed thought. And sometimes, to be honest, they are intuition, they are experience, they are judgment, they're all of the above. But sometimes they are a true bias in a performance suit, looking exactly like wisdom and costing you a mistake, a big mistake sometimes. And so, three things before we get into the biases, okay? First, biases are not character flaws. I want to make sure that we understand that. They are just programmed shortcuts that the brain has developed for speed and survival. This is not a character flaw. This is centuries, okay, of DNA evolution, through history that it's been passed down through you. It is built in us, okay? In modern business decisions, some of those shortcuts produce systematic errors. Second is awareness alone does not eliminate bias. Knowing about confirmation bias does not prevent it. Just because you know about it doesn't mean that you're going to override it. There has to be an override technique that actually interrupts it, especially in the moment when you're in it to make decisions, right? You need to have the ability to check yourself for all intents and purposes. Third, every leader has a dominant pattern and they're unique to you. Okay. Not all 6 biases that we're going to cover today hit equally for you. But today we are going to identify which one or two are most likely to show up in your decision-making process and help you build a system to catch them before they actually cost you and impact you negatively. Okay? Ready to go? Okay, let's go. All right. Now, you cannot think your way out of a bias of a bias in the moment. You can only build a system that catches it before it lands. The system in which you're building, it starts today. And I can tell you that from experience and now going through this research, man, these 6 biases that I've learned about, and they hit home for me quite deep in one in particularly. So it really helped to show me which one is my automatic landing spot. So we'll ask you later to see which one is yours. So pay attention, because when Alan goes around the room later, we're going to ask you to tell us what your strong bias is. Not what you learned, not what you liked. I want to hear what your strong bias is today. Okay. Now, I'm going to walk you through each one of them one by one. And after each one, I want you to just think about it. Maybe rate yourself if you want. There's a worksheet in the tutorial that's in the group. So you can always, go back and follow along with the worksheet. But today we're doing it live. So just rate yourself from the one that's strong. There's 6 of them. So name the strongest one, number 5, and the least, number 6. Okay. And I want you to use this so that it can help you show you which is your most strongest lean to help you make honest decisions later on. So be honest with yourself. Do not be aspirational. Do not go in this with the wishful thinking. Like, be real. Okay. Be honest with yourself. Bias number 1. This is the confirmation bias. You find what you're looking for and you stick to it. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms what you already believe, while discounting evidence that contradicts it. You unconsciously build the case for the conclusion you already want to reach. So basically, you've already made up your mind based on what you believe it to be true. Okay? What it sounds like in real action. Everyone that I talked to agreed this was the right move, while the data clearly supports what we plan to do is not exactly right. I just have a feeling that this is right, and everything I'm seeing backs it up. You've heard this before? You've experienced it? Someone that comes to you, or even yourself, if you're like, the data tells me it's right. I'm talking to everybody. They all say I should do it. Right? Now, the override or the check-in is assign a devil's advocate before gathering input. Make it their job so that they are in there building the strongest possible case against your current position. Essentially, have someone that checks your point from a different view, different lens. Listen to them first. You're not looking for reasons to proceed. You are looking for reasons to reconsider. Essentially, having that other view is super important. Bias number 2. This is the sunk cost bias. And you keep paying for past decisions because you justify it. The sunk cost bias is the tendency to continue investing in a decision, strategy, or relationship because of the time, money, or effort that you've already spent, rather than evaluating based on future value. Who's heard the term that you keep putting bad money into good or good money into bad? Like, that is a term that I've heard quite often. And it's like, you're right. Maybe I should stop putting good money into bad and walk away, or know when to walk away. Okay. The past investment becomes the justification for the current decision. And what it sounds like is the following. We have already put 6 months into this. We cannot stop now. We've spent too much on this vendor to switch. Oh man, I've heard that one. I know it is not working, but we have invested too much to walk away. I've heard that one so many times too. Generally, when it comes to vendors and people, sometimes systems, but systems is generally not as common, but people and vendors, a lot. Now, here's the override. Remove the history from the evaluation. Ask, honestly, if we were making this decision for the first time today with no prior investment, what would I do? What would we do? The answer to that question is the right call. The sunk cost is gone. It does not factor in. You're looking at it now from a starting clear lens, then from a historically invested lens. Okay. Bias number 3 is the anchoring bias. The anchoring bias is the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information encountered while making decisions. That anchors you, that supports you, that sort of stops you, right? Once anchored, all the subsequent evaluation is a negotiation away from the starting point rather than an independent assessment. So what it sounds like this way. The original quote was 80,000. So 65,000 feels like a good deal. They opened at 12 months. So getting it done in 8 weeks or in 8 months feels like a win. The first option we looked at had these features, so I keep comparing it to everything else, right? Does those connect with you? You're like, well, if they quote me 100,000, but I can get it for 65, then we should be okay. Right. And that's how you justify it, because the first data point becomes your anchor. It becomes your level of comparison. Now, the override to this is generate your own number before receiving external ones. Before you see a price, a timeline, or a projection, write down what you believe it should be. So essentially, ask yourself first, what is the value of this decision? What do I feel this should cost? What or how long should this take? So that you have a good sense of what that should be before you hear the market. Then it becomes a checkpoint, but you already have, a thought going into it. That independent anchor becomes your reference point, and the external anchor can be evaluated against your own, not treated as a baseline. So it gives you some flexibility around that data point. Now, bias number 4 is overconfidence bias. The overconfidence bias is the tendency to overestimate the accuracy of your own knowledge, predictions, and judgment. Experienced leaders are particularly vulnerable to this. Okay. The tenure in which you've done something sometimes becomes your biggest enemy, because past success creates a narrative of pattern recognition that may not apply to current conditions. So this is what it looks like. I've seen this before. I know how it plays out. I do not need more data. I got it. I know this market. My track record speaks for itself. Right? Sound familiar? The overconfidence one? I know this one hit home for me. So I know how this one can be. Now, the override is force a pre-mortem. Before committing, ask a team, ask a group. It is 12 months from now, and this decision failed spectacularly. What went wrong? Let people answer freely without defensiveness. The answer tells you what the overconfidence is hiding. If you cannot name 3 credible failure scenarios, you have not stress test this call. Essentially, like before you do a post-mortem, do a pre-mortem. Bring the group in. Be like, guys, we're looking to do this. Tell me what happens if it breaks. How does it go wrong? And hear it from the team. Sometimes you're going to find some truth that you were not expecting, and there's some good opportunity to learn and build off of that. So be open to doing those pre-mortem, not post-mortem, not after the fact, but before the fact. Okay. Here's bias number 5, and that's the loss aversion bias. The fear of losing drives harder than the potential to win. This is another one that, for those of you that are more like me, that are a little protective and not, as risk adverse, this one hit for me. So loss aversion is the tendency to feel the pain of losing something far more intensely than the pleasure of gaining something of equivalent value. In decisions, this causes leaders to avoid risk that objectively is worth taking, because the potential downside feels larger than it actually is relative to the upside. Okay. So what does this sound like? What if this does not work out 10 times for every one time that it does? Right? What if it fails more than it produces? Passing on a strong hire because of one reference that was sort of lukewarm. Holding on to an underperforming product or person because ending it feels like failure. That could be true in some relationships. Okay. The override is reframe from loss to opportunity cost. Do not ask, what could I lose? Instead, ask, what am I giving up by not making this decision? Quantify both. Put the actual numbers side by side. And when the cost of inaction becomes as visible as the cost of action, the bias loses grip and it points you in the right direction. Okay? That one kind of stuck with me a little bit. So, it's something that I'm looking forward to applying a little bit more. Bias number 6 is groupthink bias. The room agreed, so it must be true, must be right. I've heard this one many, many times in my career. Groupthink is the tendency for cohesive groups to prioritize harmony and consensus over critical evaluation. Right? Who's heard that? That the views are suppressed, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes through social pressure. The result is decisions that feel unanimous, but are actually unexamined. What it sounds like is everyone in the room was aligned, so no one raised any concerns. The team is excited about this, but the meeting ends in 20 minutes with no pushback on a complex decision. I know I've seen that. I've seen some quick decisions just because people felt like it was the right thing to do. The override is structured dissent before the meeting ends. Designate one person to argue against the consensus position before the decision is finalized. Or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, use a anonymous pre-meeting input. Go seek independent discussions, write those down before your meeting begins. So social pressure cannot suppress early perspectives. And silence in the room is not an agreement. It is usually and often deference. Okay? So just make sure that you do not mistake in silence for agreement in the room. If silence is what you get when you're seeking consensus, go deeper, because the potential risk is that your people are not being open and honest in a group setting. Okay? Now, you've had an opportunity to listen to all 6. Curious to know, rate them. Put some numbers from 1 to 6 in your own time right now, right? Just look at your list and say which one is your most dominant one, because we're going to come to you and ask you that later. Okay? Now, there's 3 questions to identify your true pattern. Question 1 is, which bias do I recognize most in my recent decisions? Think of a specific decision in the last 90 days. Which bias was operating in the way that you decided? Question 2, which bias am I most likely to miss in the moment? Think of that question again. Which bias am I most likely to miss in the moment? Not the one that I know about. The one that operates below your awareness. Which one becomes almost like when you're an autopilot. Okay? And question 3 is, which bias has cost me the most over the last 2 years? Not the one that you're embarrassed about, the one with the clearest price tag, the one that you feel the pain point that cost you the most. Just do that for a minute. Okay? Look through your list. Once you've done a good run through, I want you to estimate the cost. Think of one specific decision in the last 2 years where your dominant bias was clearly operating, and what did it cost you? Financially, in time, in a relationship, maybe in an opportunity? Can you quantify a number to that experience? Write that down. Put it on your sheet of paper, because that number is what a bias looks like in a P&L if you were thinking of yourself as a business. Okay? Now, again, we have a checklist in the community worksheet that you can go and write all this down, and you're able to, make it all work for yourself in a format that'll help point it all out for you. But again, today we're live, so we're not going to go through all that. Just pointing you to the worksheet and into the community. They're there for you to use them. Okay? I'm going to take you through a case study. It's a wholesale distribution company, 44 employees, $6.8 million in revenue. So fairly sized, good company. The owner launched a new product line 18 months prior. In months 1 through 6, they were slower than projected, but showing promise. Month 7, margins started to compress, and the demand was not growing as expected. Months 9 onward, every internal review showed declining performance, and every review ended with the same decision: continue investing, double down, continue this pattern. 2 biases were clearly operating in this scenario in combination. First, the sunk cost, $340,000 invested. So not like cheap money. This was significant. And the justification for every subsequent decision was protecting that initial investment, not evaluating what the next dollar would be in a return. $340,000 was gone regardless. Like, that's already spent. So it's done. It's over. But the decision should have been about the future, not about the past, because you couldn't really affect it all that much now. And confirmation was the second bias. Every review focused on the metrics that showed potential. A few strong months, a couple of large orders, the data showing structural margin compression was consequently reframed as temporary or a market timing issue, but not clearly identified as a source of truth. The owner only consulted advisors who had previously supported the launch, so the information was going to be from a one-way street. And every conversation became more evidence for what he already wanted to believe it to be true. The turning point didn't actually happen until a new operations director who joined and requested a clean slate financial review with no prior context joined the organization. And her conclusion in 1 week was that this product line will never reach target margin. The cost structure is wrong for the market, she said, and she had no sunk bias because she wasn't part of the tenure, and she had no confirmation history. All she saw what was in front of her. And what she saw clearly was 18 months of investment that had obstructed everybody else. So after looking through all this, $180,000 in annual operating overhead freed up when they canceled it. They pivoted quickly, and the sales team then was allowed to refocus on its core lines. Revenue up 14% in the following few months. The owner's reflection that he shared was, I knew by month 9. Afterwards, after reviewing it, he said, man, I knew it. I kept finding reasons not to decide, though. The biases did not create a bad product line. They prevented a good leader from making a correct decision for 9 months after. The cost was not the product line. Again, the cost was in the 9 months. It was 9 months that continued to be pain points. So that's sort of the scenario that I want to leave you thinking with, right? What happens here when you now take that learning and you think back to your own applications? How does that impact the way that you have made decisions in the past? So I want you to think about some things as we move into next week, and I want you to do the following 4 steps, okay? And this is like something that you could work also on the worksheets, okay? But in step 1 is classify the decision you're using your week 2 framework, high or low stakes, reversible or not. Remember, those of you that joined us learned about that quadrant and how and which one or which type you ties in with your decision making. So use that tool. And then step 2, your dominant bias check. Write a personal override question for each of your 2 dominant biases, not a generic question, one that's specific to you that interrupts your pattern. I want you to work on that so that you can now check yourself, essentially, okay? And step 3 is that every significant decision will get through generic questions. So make sure that you're not using a lot of these, universal ones. And some of these are like, am I deciding from strength or from fear or loss? What would I advise a trusted peer to do in the same situation? Some of these universal questions that I'm asking today, put those in there because they will help you significantly as your decisions become clear, okay? And step 4 is the final gate. If you were advising someone else, not living it yourself, would you make the same call? Take a step back, take that neutral approach, and ask, am I comfortable in that decision if it reflects my best judgment and not my most comfortable one? That's your checklist for your bias blocker. 4 steps, literally a couple minutes before every significant decision. The framework that we've spoken about tells you how to process it. but the checklist tells you what is trying to undermine through the process. Together, that procedure, and they together those they combine into a procedure that that is quality of decision making and that ensures the stakes actually get looked after. So this week was week 3. Now you have what the 3 tools look like from the series. Week 1 was a decision audit. You know, and you learned what is on your plate and if it belongs to you or someone else. Week 2 was the decision framework. You learned how to match your process to the decision type. And week 3 is your bias blocker. You now know what is working against your judgment from the inside, from internally, what is deep within you. And week 4 brings it all together. This is where we build the decision operating system, the personal rhythms, the habits, the structures that make great decision making repeatable instead of accidental or by fluke, right? These daily decisions, these weekly reviews, quarterly collaboration, a delegation framework that actually holds water, all come together from weeks 1 through 4. So we'll bring it all together next week and we'll close off the series. So we look forward to seeing you then. But first, I'll go over to Alan and then we'll go through Willy to give an idea of which one was your strongest bias. So, Alan, maybe we'll start with you.
Wow, good stuff, man. Good stuff. You know, one of the things I've learning, learned
Yeah.
in the last 2 weeks and learning is that I have room for improvement on my decision making.
Nice. Well, we all do, Al. We're human.
Yeah, we all do, but I used to I'd pride myself as one of the things that I really carried with me for a lot of years was I really prided myself on my capacity and my ability to make good decisions. At least that's what I thought. And
Mm.
I guess there was a bias there. Uh, but I really took last week's lesson quite seriously and I dove into the lesson. I was forced into making some decisions the last week that I didn't want to make.
Oh, yeah.
Some not work related decisions, but some personal decisions that really other people probably should be making, but they didn't want to, and so it got
Mm.
carried over to like, well, oh, let Al make the decision, and then if
Yeah.
if everything goes to shit, sorry, but if everything goes
Yeah.
south,
Yeah.
well, then we'll blame him, and then but
Yes.
then if everything goes good, they're still going to somehow get the credit, and I really found that I kind of through that I really found I don't have a great decision making process that helps me kind of evaluate through different stages that maybe I didn't even realize existed. So, guys, I just want to say, um, these lessons that Hector brings and that we're learning and that's in the platform, in the community later. Man, we are doing ourselves a disservice if all we do is show up on these calls and listen.
Yes.
Because I don't know, I have to make an assumption, and if you ask my ex-wife, she'll tell me I'm always wrong when I assume, but I'm going to assume anyway, that most people on the call are probably a lot like me, and that is if I don't, it's just the way human nature is, right? If we don't apply what we learn within 72 hours of hearing it, learning it, we won't do diddly squat with it. We do nothing with it. And it's like we didn't even hear it in the first place. 72 hours, 3 days,
Yeah.
3 days or less. And for most people, it's even less than that. It's like more in the 48-hour range. And I really hope that we're doing something with the knowledge that Hector brings to this room and to this community. And then, the team puts the effort into putting on the community. It has really brought some major things to light, especially around decision making for me this week. And I couldn't dare make a bad decision because people's lives were actually
Oh,
at risk because
yeah, absolutely.
I had a death in the family
Oh,
last week,
man.
and then I had a scenario where I don't know if you ever had to go through the process of committing an aging loved one to offsite permanent care,
Mm. Mm.
and that's uncomfortable. But then, especially when it's long distance and it's not convenient, and then a scenario inside of that environment changed drastically, and a decision had to be made, and it's like it was going to actually affect a loved one's standard of living.
Wow.
and could even have a potential of, do they continue to stay with us? And
Right, right.
and I really thought, and it was a emotional week, but
No kidding.
I came back. It's bizarre. You think you pay me to say this, but I came back to this lesson, and I thought, I realized that I'm lacking in my capacity to make very important decisions that aren't going to affect just me, but other things. And I could so see parallels inside business as well. And it really
Hmm.
made me go back and look at, how do I actually make decisions? And am I content to continue to making decisions based on how I was always making decisions, especially through my bias that I thought that I was making good decisions.
Yeah,
So
yeah, amazing.
it's been such a great lesson. And so I say to y'all, I hope that you take all of these lessons, that we don't just hear them, but we apply them. Um, and what was it? Was it? I know there was a famous martial arts China, Japanese. Was it Jackie Chan, or was it? Anyway, somebody said, we can't just hear, we can't just know, we have to do. We got to do something with
Oh,
this stuff. And if we
nice.
actually do something with this stuff, it's really, really going to help. And so
Yeah.
I actually, I know I'm taking a little bit of time. I don't know if you can
No,
see this, but
I can.
I actually made a matrix,
I
just
like it.
a quick matrix of last week's lesson. And then I shrunk it down on a photocopier, and then made a card out of it, and I stuck it in my wallet. And that way, anytime, doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing, I'm out and about, I'm here and I'm there, I'm in, whatever. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden I got a decision ahead of me. I don't have to wait, right? I pull out my wallet, I pull out my little card, and I go, okay, what quadrant? And I walk through the quadrants, and it's been very helpful for me.
That's amazing.
Lessons.
That's cool. That's a really good story, and I appreciate you sharing, your experience, Al. I'm sure this was a tough week for you, and it sounds like you needed to really dive deep into using these tools. So that's great that they were available to you. I'm glad that you were able to,
Yeah.
to overcome those weekly that challenge that you faced last week.
But then I took other family members into this as well. I said, look, I want to show you this thing. And it really
Hmm.
made me think, man, back when I was running my oil field company, how advantageous it would have been had I had, this lesson, and maybe like that matrix, to sit down with other members of my team and say, I can't make this decision on my own, and you can't make this decision on your own. Because sometimes
Right.
as the leader, we think, okay, well, I just I want to delegate this decision to that manager, that whatever team member. That's in your pocket to make. I'll step out of this one, but sometimes we need other people in there to make those decisions with us. This would have been such a
Absolutely.
great, great, great tool for me to use back when I really, really needed. Hector, where the heck were you back when I needed you, right?
Oh man.
Yeah, so it's been really great. And then to look at my bias this week. I'll save mine for later. But I'm like,
Okay.
oh yeah, that's mine. That's mine. And so I got two pretty strong ones with a third. It's like, oh
Oh
dang.
yeah. Third
Three out of
close.
three out of six are kind of high. Anyway, it's been really good. I would like to open the room for everybody, but before I do that, I would love to, if Willie would be willing to let us put him on the spot a little bit. Willie, I'd love for you to share with us, if you can do that, kind of what was your journey in Willie's trucking with these kind of biases, and how you kind of maneuvered through that. Because I know, a little bit about your story. You had to make some big decisions. There was the company, maybe wasn't doing as well as it had, what I'm making, but maybe wasn't doing as well as maybe everybody wanted it to, or you wanted it to, or whatever. But then some important and critical decisions had to be made. And how did
Mm.
you go through that? And especially today's lesson on these biases, kind of where did that really rub for you? And how did you use this to make those decisions that needed to be made in the right way, um, even if you had to get yourself out of the way, so that the company survived and then grew, and became the success story that it was.
Yeah, I think the first lesson here is for me, like overconfidence is the one that rates the highest for me, and then the bias thing really speaks to me. And I think the first thing here, what has to come into play, is being open-minded and listen. Like those are
Mhm.
just, I think the further I got myself into trouble in our first business, I started to see I had to be more willing to listen to new ideas, even though I was biased on thinking no, that's not even doesn't even make sense. But I think we have to sometimes hear out what the other way might look like. And I'm thinking even when we were looking at really getting efficient in our business, I had this bias that I wanted to run all Kenworth trucks were my favorite trucks, and but they cost more. And I my bias was because I like that truck the most, we wouldn't get any good drivers anymore if we bought a Freightliner or whatever. And and that it had to break me, and then we started buying Freightliner trucks, and the business just ran like before or better, and now we had lower costs on trucks. So the biases can really cost your business.
Isn't that
Yeah.
so true? And I love the practicalness of that. Kind of made me chuckle, and I didn't mean to, make fun of, but how true that really is. And I bet you every one of us on the call could relate to that in some capacity. Oh, my favorite truck was, I did that back when I was buying fleets of trucks in the oil field. Like, yeah, my daddy raised me to be a Ford guy, and so I wouldn't even look at anything else. I just bought all Fords, whether they were in the shop all the time or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
and I had to be the guy that had the best equipment in the field. Had to be the guy that had the best equipment. I wasn't going to put up with second-rate equipment. That cost me a lot of money, and that cost the company a lot of things that different decisions would have, maybe had better outcomes. So I appreciate that very much. It's very practical for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and for an example, there again, never thought we would go to just day cab trucks versus sleeper trucks, and then we went to all day cabs on the highway, and but we positioned those trucks where the drivers were home every night. So, but there again, we saved ourselves money again on that move.
Isn't this an amazing science? This is almost more than just learning how to make good decisions. It's almost a real kind of goes into the psychology of how the human thinks and behaves.
Mhm.
This is almost more of a deep psychology than just surface decision making, but how it affects everything, right? And then how it affects the bottom line in business. And not
Yeah.
only not only the profitability, say, of an organization, but it can affect culture in an organization,
Oh
huge.
yeah, absolutely.
And it's going to affect how you hire and who you keep and I mean, it can affect every level of everything in a business. Amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, it truly
Nice.
is. So it's such an important lesson. I hope we do the homework on this. I really hope we all go in and into the community and work on this. It's so great.